Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth, writes Viktor Frankl in his landmark book, Man in Search of Meaning. And he continues, in fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibility. This past week at our Seders, we read about the Israelites' redemption from slavery and how they celebrated the euphoric moment when finally they were unbounded from Pharaoh's oppressive regime. As Passover draws to an end, we are left with an enduring question. What exactly is freedom? The Israelites had to grapple with this concept almost immediately after crossing the sea. As soon as the Israelites became a freed people, they simultaneously are bound to new constraints. They move from Pharaoh's law to God's law. But these two frameworks are entirely different. Pharaoh's law is the grounding for a society that subjugates others in order to enrich and enlarge Pharaoh. God's law is the grounding for a society based on honoring the holiness innate in all of God's creation. We read about Moses receiving the 10 Commandments, followed by many passages describing laws in detail. There are positive laws, negative laws, time-sensitive laws, laws unbounded by time. Some of these laws seem obvious, while others are truly perplexing. The Israelites accept the Torah, binding themselves to these laws and all future generations too, to the Torah's code of law. And there is a profound teaching in this action of becoming free and at the same moment protecting the freedom within the perimeters of law. In some sense, this is the answer to the question, what exactly is freedom? Because once freedom is no longer an abstract idea, it needs a framework. Freedom is a state that can only exist within agreed-upon boundaries. God's law presents a radical departure from life under Pharaoh. Under Pharaoh, relationships were transactional. People were valued for what they could provide. We understand what this is like intimately. We all participate in relationships like these that are reductionist, when we only see one another for our transactional value. Under God's law, relationships have a spiritual dimension. We are all B'Tselem Elohim, created in God's image. Imagine if our federal and local systems of law prioritize the idea that holiness exists within each and every person. What would such a system look like? What ethical considerations would be at play? How would we maintain the delicate balance between our own needs and the needs of another? As Jews, this question is a guiding tenet. It is a religious principle. We retell and remember our ancestors' experience of hardship and slavery so as to never be hardened to the suffering of others. As Jews, our freedom is intrinsically enmeshed with the welfare of other people. A Jewish folktale. A soul arrived in the afterlife at the throne of judgment. This soul was evenly balanced between goodness and sin. It wasn't completely worthy of going to heaven, and it wasn't guilty enough to be sent to Gehenna. So the angels in charge decided that this soul would visit both heaven and Gehenna and choose its own destiny. The angel took the soul on a tour of the options. First, they went to Gehenna, which appeared beautiful, opulent. There was a mansion, and each room was more splendid than the other. In one particular room, they found people sitting at a giant banquet table laden with every delicacy that one could imagine. But the soul noticed something strange. The people were not eating, and they looked emaciated and miserable. And when the soul looked a little closer, he discerned what was happening. The people sitting around the table were unable to bend their elbows. So while they had the freedom to reach out and grab the food, there was no way that they could get it into their mouths. Everything they desired was right before them, yet completely inaccessible. They were free to take, and yet they were bound. The angel took the soul to heaven next, and the setting was exactly the same opulent mansion and banquet hall, the same affliction with the elbow. And yet the people in heaven sitting around the table were rosy with nourishment and contentment. The soul looked around with amazement to see each person at the table realizing that they only had to reach out to their neighbor to feed them. The same world can be either heaven or Gehenna, depending on the ways in which we use our freedom. As we enter into the final stretch of Passover, how do we understand freedom? At our Seders, we remembered that Pharaoh hardened his heart over and over to deny our freedom. Yet we too can find ourselves hardening our hearts to the needs of others. Real freedom demands that we meet the moment before us, even when it comes at a personal cost. As Rabbi Shai Held writes, mindfulness and constant, exquisite attention are necessary for freedom to flourish. Freedom needs to be nourished and attended to, not taken for granted. Freedom is, in other words, a spiritual project. In order to thrive, it must be brought into awareness and actively cultivated. Then, and only then, can we soften our hearts. Freedom is precious and hard-won. We are more aware than perhaps any other time in our lifetimes that we cannot afford apathy. We, the inheritors of the legacy of the Israelites, must understand our role in protecting freedom. Rabbi Tarfon said, "The day is short, the work abundant. The laborers are sluggish and tired. The reward is great, and the master is pressing." We must not allow ourselves to become sluggish, slowed down by overwhelm and complacency. The urgency of the task is pressing. We must take on the burden and the responsibility of nurturing the conditions from which freedom can truly thrive. Shabbat Shalom.